okay. It seems to be working.
And sometimes technology fails us.
Yeah. That's the way it is. Technology.
I'm glad we finally were able to connect. I've really been looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, and I look forward to some responses. How do you want to do this? When I do this, I prefer to include the question in my responses. So I would appreciate it if you would send the question first, and then I can respond to it. Is that okay?
That's fine. That's fine. Whatever makes you feel the most comfortable.
Okay.
I have them right here in front of me, and as I said before, don't think of this as a Q&A. This is something that anything you feel you need to expand on or want to go into or want to sidetrack into, I'm more than happy to listen to you. But I wanted to ask, first, tell us who you are and what you do that makes you so exceptional, how you earned your letters.
Mm-hmm. I'm a Black American anthropologist. I'm from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I served in the military. I served in Vietnam. I went to college for my bachelor's on the GI Bill, and I got married, had a family, raised my kids, and then took an early retirement. Went back to school and finished my master's in anthropology and my PhD in anthropology. The master's is in medical anthropology. I'm an epidemiologist, and the PhD is in urban anthropology. And after that, I came to Brazil. And I've been here in Brazil now for 10 years, last February. And since that time, I've been writing. I came here to do research on anthropology because Brazil at that time, 2007, the country was changing truly because of the rapid economic growth. And I found it a place to do it. So for the first 18 months, I go back and forth. I made, and on one of those trips, I met my wife, and I came back and decided to settle here in Brazil. Back and forth to United, trying to pull together my effects because, as you will probably remember, 2008 was the year of the Wall Street crash.
Yes, I remember that vividly.
I ran into a lot of problems with selling my house. I was back and forth until finally, I just had to give it up because the value of the house inside of 1 year plummeted over 60%. And so I just packed up my things, gave my daughter who was in college, and sold off my furniture, and bought only the things that I really needed, which were books and my computer and the materials that I had to do research and to write with. That's pretty much it.
So outside of the military, Brazil was your first international trip? I mean, outside of your military duty?
No. While in the military, as I said, I served in Vietnam. I traveled throughout Asia, Japan, Tokyo, China, Hong Kong for 2 years. And I've been traveling ever since. Over the past 40 years, I traveled to about 15 different countries and lived on 4 different continents.
Wow, you make a world-weary traveler like me still seem like an amateur compared to your list of feats and the places you've been. I hope that when I'm where you are in life, I'll have as many places under my belt. I think I have about as many countries, but I haven't spent the amount of time you have in any one place because Brazil has been a place where I've kind of built my home for the past 2 years. Was it your wife that made you make Brazil home for the foreseeable future, or was Brazil where you wanted to be, and your wife was an added cherry on top of that cake?
Yeah, it was the latter. When I came to Brazil in 2007, it was a wonderful country. Lula was beginning his second term as president, and the country was growing. The GDP was 7.5. People had jobs. Credit was flowing, and I liked the weather, the food, and the people. And I found that it was a good place to do research because the culture was changing so rapidly. And since then, during that time, I met my wife, and we hit it off. And I decided it was a difficult decision because the house and furniture and car and a lot of things that I had to, arrangements that I had to make in order to come here to live. And I saw that she wasn't prepared to come to the United States. Besides, at that time, it was pretty difficult for Brazilians to get visas into the United States. So I made the conscious decision to come here on my own and to move to Brazil. And so having her as a support system, I didn't speak any Brazilian at the time, any Portuguese. And so she helped me with the language, customs, traditions. She showed me, how to get around, what areas were safe, what areas were not safe, and pretty much schooled me on everything that I need to know in order to survive in Brazil.
And what city was this in where you landed, as opposed to where you are now, or have you always been where you are now?
Sure, yeah. I had a friend who was living here. He's been living here for about 5 years. And as I said, after finishing my master's and PhD, I hadn't had a vacation in about 5 or 6 years. So he invited me to come down, and I came down in about a week before Carnival endorsement in 2007. And I liked the country. The first thing that impressed me was the friendliness of the people. And then I liked the weather, the food, and I just thought to myself, this would be a nice place to live, even before I had even met her.
And how does that living experience in Brazil, considering how long you've been here, how does it compare to what it's like today? I've only been here 2 years, and you've been here 10. What was because my 2 years have been pretty steady as far as how I built my business and how the economy has gone. It's probably more in my favor than not. I can't complain, but I also know that I don't have the boom years to compare it to. And what would you say, not just economically, but with the society, from your bird's eye view, what's changed in Brazil?
Well, as you say, I've been living here for 10 years now. Unfortunately, over the last 7 years, the country has taken a turn for the worse. When I arrived in 2007, there were problems, mostly social problems, education, healthcare, infrastructure. But the government under Lula was making an effort to address those problems. And around 2010, things began to change. In 2012, I noticed a lot of foreigners, Canadians, Germans, and British, leaving Brazil and returning to their home countries. But I decided to stay in Brazil, hoping that things would turn around. But they only became worse. Now there's a bevy of problems. The government is very corrupt. The economy is in crisis. Society is in decline. What I mean by that is, because of the economic crisis, the quality of living is less now. People are not able to afford the things that they could afford during the Lula years, and inflation is eating up the real value of the currency. They still have these problems with the education system. Healthcare is suffering, the infrastructure, and now with this what is it called, austerity package that the current president has put into effect, which actually has been passed by the Senate and the Congress, whereby they're going to cut all social spending for the next 20 years. I just don't see how people are going to be able to maintain or actually to survive with the country, with the government. They're not going to take money away from these programs, but they are not going to be allocating more money. To me, that's a very...
Well, let me back up just so I get a clear definition. When you say they're going to cut spending on social programs, how do they define a social program?
Social programs are programs, well, I don't know how they define it, but I can tell you how it's being reported. They're talking about education, they're talking about healthcare, they're talking about infrastructure, security. As you probably heard in Sao Paulo, there's a lot of problems with paying the police now. Okay?
Yeah.
And the crime, as a result, crime has increased. I've done some research on practically every major city in Brazil, in all of the different states. I have the stats on the percentage of crime, how it has increased, and in what areas it has increased. And it's pretty much across the board because of the economic crisis. And this is a pretty common characteristic. When you have an economic crisis, crime increases. And so I think that is a mistake because, to me, in my opinion, that's only going to lead to more suffering from the population in general. For example, if they don't spend more money on education, or they start to cut some of these programs like science across the border without frontiers, they start to cut some of the other educational programs. They don't allocate more money for deferred maintenance in the schools, for the books, or the materials. Hello.
I lost you for a minute.
Yeah, we got disconnected just for a minute. So did that answer your question about the perspectives?
Well, the first part of the grander scale, but I wanted to ask about the article that was the first one that really came to my attention. That I'm sure it's gained a lot of traction for you. I don't even know when it was originally published, but you have an article, and the title is not provocative. It is a very clear outlook, but I've never seen something cause so many people to either go left or right just by reading it without even having gone through the article, giving opinions on it. So immediately I had to read it. It looks like it was first published in August 1st of 2015, called Black American Men and Brazilian Women.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, now, without asking you to recite the entirety of your passage, you said some things throughout this pretty lengthy and in-depth digging in to those two groups of people. Where did this come from? Where was the seed for this article? Because I'm definitely going to send everyone who reads my website this way. What started it? What gave you the seed to say, I need to write about this cultural phenomenon?
Okay, as I said before, came to Brazil to write a book on culture. I've been working on the book for now 8 years. It's called Cultural Transformation, Remaking of Brazilian Society. So I had 8 years of research already at my disposal. Black American Men and Brazilian Women was an off-the-cuff quote. It just came to me after joining Charles Tyler's group, Black Men Option. And as I said, I had 4 years of research. And I wrote in about 2 months as an insight, hopefully an insight into what American Black men have encountered to establish cultural relationships with Brazilian women. I wanted to keep the book, I wanted to write it in an academic vein. I wanted to write it in a very simple, plain speaking way so that I wouldn't be coming off intellectual academic. But that's why I try to keep the title as simple as possible and straight to the point. Black American Men and Women. Don't have great titles. So I try to avoid that. I was surprised at the support shown after a group of others read the book and recommended finally to others. It was still selling. I'm glad that it turned out to be a successful effort for others. And that's basically what I was trying to do. That was my purpose. To try to provide brothers who were just who were thinking about coming to Brazil to live, to give them some insight into some of the cultural characteristics of the people, of the country, of the society. So that for two reasons. One, I only had very few people who reached out to help me when I first came to Brazil. It was three or four people. John Thompson, a white guy named Donald Reed, and there was another. And there's a white guy from California who lives here in Salvador named Brian, who owns a posada down by Puerto de Baja. And they were the only support systems that I had. Other than that, trial and error. So I wanted to try to put together something that would give brothers more insight in what this country was about and what to get involved with from both a social perspective and from a cultural perspective. Okay, and that was the purpose of the book.
Well, I'll tell you something that I want everyone listening to this to be aware of. And as a writer, I've been approached by different publications and websites to write about what it's like here with from the context of an American man and Brazilian women. The reason I refer everyone to what you wrote is because it was not in any way exploitive. I see all too often people commodifying women, particularly black and brown women, as if they're some sort of chattel to be bought and sold, who are stunned, speechless by an American or a UK passport, as if they're completely devoid of any other capacity. And it's amazing when I see this done, particularly by other black writers. It stuns me sometimes. And when I read yours, I said, you know what, this is a very credible writing, and this is something that you can send to anyone to read. It doesn't matter whether or not it's a man or a woman. And I really want to applaud you for that, for having the integrity to not allow, which I'm sure you've been proposed by people, to write some sort of exploitive, salacious article about what it's like and what women are like here. It really is disturbing, because I have friends and relatives all over the world who ask me about life here, whose first glimpse of it has been through something that's completely demeaning. And I have to really get their heads around these things and say, you know, don't listen to that. These are the same people who bring you salacious titles on their websites designed to convince you that there's nothing more than the commodification of a certain people in a certain area.
Yeah. I experienced some of that when I was coming back and forth to Brazil in 2007, 2008. I was working for probably the oldest law firm in the United States of America. I don't know if I can mention their names, but they've been around since 1783. And when I was coming back and forth, you know, with coworkers, they would say, "Oh, well, Neil, where are you taking your vacation this year?" I would say, "I'm going to Brazil." And they would say, "Brazil?" And then I would get this onslaught of questions, because everyone was curious. I found in 10 years living in Brazil and going back and forth between Brazil and the United States, that Americans know very little about Brazil. As a matter of fact, Brazilians know more about the United States than Americans know about Brazil. So that was another motive for the book, specifically Black American men who were considering coming to Brazil to live. And I thought it was very demeaning. Some of the things that were very demeaning. And it made me curious. You know, it made me curious, putting on my anthropological hat. It made me curious as to why would people think this, and what kind of information were they getting that was making them think this. So that's why I said, well, let me go down there and check the place out for myself, see if there's an opportunity there to do some research and or to write some books about Brazil.
Wow. And do you still get a lot of references to that article? Because it's still fairly fresh off the plate.
Yeah, people are still being, on the Perspective website, one of the highest read articles is still Black American men and Brazilian women. There's a few others, but that one is still up in the top 5.
Wow. Well, it's powerful writing, and I'm definitely going to link to it. I won't just copy and paste what you said. Of course, I'm going to link to it because I want you to get that traffic on your website, because you write about quite a bit.
Yeah.
You're not limited in your interests.
The first 3 chapters of the book are kind of anecdotal. It's sometimes difficult to just throw together and write from the academic perspective and be able to get a cross section of people interested or readership. So I said, well, let me tell my story in the first 3 chapters, so that people will realize that it wasn't just a very simple and easy transition. I went through an introduction, I went through difficulties and hardships, and then I went through the period of overcoming those difficulties and hardships. A lot of that had to do with the language, having to get command of the language. And I believe language is the portal to culture. When I was on the other side of the language. I called it my observer participant stage. You're an observer, but you're not really a participant because of the language barrier. You know, people can say things in the language and blow it past you really fast. You have no idea what they're saying, whether they're saying something good about you or something or about a situation or something bad. But then when you cross over the language barrier, which took me about 3 years, I gave myself 5 years, but with the help from my wife and friends and family always correcting me and my own due diligence, it took about 3 years, 3.5 years, and then it was another year or so to try to get down all of the slangs, you know, because here in Bahia they have something called Baianese, and it's a slang version of Portuguese, of Brazilian Portuguese, and so all in all it took about 5 years. But once I got a command of the language, once I became fluent with the language, then I crossed over the barrier, and that began what I called my participant observer period and on stage. From that point on, I could penetrate deeper and deeper and deeper into the society because now I understood the language. I understood the little off-the-cuff remarks, the little off-the-cuff slangs, and I began to understand the significance behind them, the meaning behind the expressions that they use in the language, which manifests itself in the culture.
And I think that's where, you know, I'm still really on my journey to becoming fluent and proficient. I'm combining, you know, my social speaking with actually taking some formal classes in it, and I hope to get up to proficiency because I need to be able to speak my Portuguese at the same academic level that I speak English. That's a very, very important thing to me.
Well, speaking it on an academic level is one thing, but it's also the what I call common language.
All right. I don't know what happened. I guess our phones just don't like each other right now. But you were talking about the importance of travel and learning a language. Well, what I wanted to wrap up with was what is sometimes the most important thing I ask people outside of their own experience. Who do you know that I should talk to? Not just here in Brazil, but anywhere in the world, someone of interest, someone that has a story to tell that you would suggest I talk to?
Well, I think it depends on what is it that you're trying to, what is it is it something structural? Is it something cultural? You know, the last 40 years I've traveled in a countries and made a lot of depending upon that. So it depends on the most specific.
I'm looking for someone who has an experience outside of the average everyday experience. I like to talk to people who have something unusual about the things they've accomplished or are trying to accomplish. Not rich, not poor, not a laureate and not a pauper. I'm just looking to talk to other people that, you know, because I work through references. I have friends that introduce me to other great people, which is how I got to be introduced to you. Who can you say, you know what, here's somebody I can point you at that I know that I should say has an interesting story to tell or can really help you to advance your learning about the world?
Well, Cornel West comes to mind right off the top of my head. He's a very interesting person. I think the asking is what people was I influenced by or do I hold in high esteem? I've been fortunate most of my life because I was always in the company of people greater than myself. And I had the good sense to just listen and to learn from them. I have an older brother who is a very famous jazz musician who lives in Paris. And I spent a lot of time in Paris, and I met a lot of interesting people, not only musicians, but artists, poets. Leroy Jones was a good, Amiri Baraka was a very good friend of my brother's, and in his company a lot. Archie Shepp from Philadelphia, a great jazz musician. Cecil Taylor. These are all unique people. unique in not only their personalities, but in unique in what they have to. In terms of the field of anthropology, they have a colleague that I contact frequently. His name is John Keith Hart. He is an economic anthropologist who went to Cambridge and taught at Cambridge for many years in the London School of Economics, and he was director of the University in Victoria, South Africa. He's another very interesting person who's accomplished a lot in his life, very humble, very aware. And those are some of the people right off the top of my head that I can think of that left a lasting impression on me by way of their personalities and by way of what they have accomplished with their lives.
Excellent. Can you put me in contact with one of them?
Sure, I can send you an email.
Absolutely.
Email address.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. Well, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to ask me, or if there's anything that a stone that you felt like I left unturned.
Yeah, no, not that you left anything unturned, but I would like to ask you a question about Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
I've been to Sao Paulo several times, but I never lived in Sao Paulo, so I'm aware that the what they call Paulistas, that their culture is different from that of the Nordestinos or the Cariocas or the Gaúchos. And I realize that Brazil is a country that has 5 different regions, and in each one of those regions, the people have their own different types of food, their own different types of dress, their own different types of music. So I was wondering if you could tell me some of the things that you find that are different about the Paulistas or the people who live in that area of Brazil as opposed to other parts of Brazil.
My experience has been a little bit in Salvador, a little bit in Rio, and most of the bulk of it has been here in São Paulo. The pace of life is faster. People walk faster. People talk faster. People here are a lot more business-minded. I won't necessarily say less friendly, but they are very much, I will flat out say, a very money-oriented city, which is part of my decision to settle here as opposed to other places. I do know that you can have a lot more of a social life, I think, so to speak, in other places. Here, you have to actively look for it. There are certain things I like to do culturally and recreationally that I had to seek out, and once I sought out those communities, they were there for me, as opposed to having very large social evening groups that they have in other places. I'd also say that here, the good part is there's a little something for everyone. One of my favorite things to do is museums. There's tons of museums here that range from giant museums to tiny off-the-wall museums that I've been able to find and take pictures and really explore.
Would you compare it to New York? New York?
New York has a harshness to it that is born of the cold weather. That's a phenomenon that's been well documented. People, I was born in upstate Niagara Falls, New York. Places that have 3, 4, 5 months of a harsh cold weather that really defines your life makes a harder people. So while I would say it has a lot of the diversity that New York has, it doesn't have that cutthroat edge. Yeah. It definitely doesn't have that cutthroat edge.
I'm familiar with upstate New York, up near Niagara. Boy, when it snows up there, man, it really snows.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not even the snow that gets you, it's the cold. When it's that negative 10, 15 degrees where you can't go outside, you can't put your key in your door. It breeds, I think the nice way to say it would be a hardiness, whereas here, people don't have any day of the week or month where they can't call their friends up and say, you know what, I just had a long day in the office. Let's go have coffee outside somewhere. Let's go grab a dinner someplace.
The environment does influence us. I realized that about Brazil myself when I came here. The people are much more friendly. The people are much more hospitable. They're just much more warmer, and it has to do with the climate. It really does.
Absolutely. So here, that's what I've found. Socially, I do find one of the biggest differences that I note between here and Rio, and I think Rio is a great place, have its own unique culture, is it is safer than Rio. I don't really see, there's a huge disparity in wealth that we can discuss another day, but there is a level of teeth that I feel sometimes walking down the streets in Rio that I don't feel here.
A level of peace?
No, of teeth, Teeth, fangs, claws, predatorial stares.
Entendi.
I've never, as a man who's training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kickboxing in Thailand, I've never been afraid to take a beating. I've never been a man who walked in fear until I was in Rio and I saw a 14-year-old child look at me with a coldness in his eyes that really made me decide I just needed to walk a little faster.
Yeah, that's true. As I said, I have the statistics. A lot of people think Sao Paulo is more dangerous than Rio, but it's not true. The statistics don't bear that. I have all the statistics for all of the different types of crime, snatch and grabs, house invasions, highway robbery, and the statistics bear the fact that it's more dangerous in Rio de Janeiro than it is in Sao Paulo.
Yeah. I don't know anyone in Rio that hasn't seen a violent crime. Everyone I know in Sao Paulo that has had a crime occur, it's usually someone stole my phone. That's
okay then, Brother Yusef. Is that about it?
Absolutely, and thank you very much. And I'll be looking for the links to the places that you referred to me and talked about so that I can add those to our conversation.
Okay, my brother. I thank you for having me, and I thank you for the opportunity to explain to you and to whoever else might be listening what my work is about, and the focus that I'm trying to present, or the perspective rather, that I'm trying to present to the world.
All right. You have a great day.
You too. Ciao,
Bye-bye.
ciao.